Good evening, everybody. My name is Rabbi Louis Sachs. I'm the rabbi here at Beth Torah, and I just want to welcome all of you tonight to this program, to this debate. It's really my pleasure and honor that Beth Torah is hosting this event, and I want to thank very much Brith for organizing it and all of the amazing work that they do in the Jewish community and the world at large. I think it's really fitting and really nice that the synagogue is hosting an event such as this. It's a very Jewish thing to argue, right? To debate. But in a proper way. There's a quote in the Talmud I always loved. Barzel bevarzel yachad. That iron sharpens iron. And the rabbis teach us that it's a debate between two scholars that makes our ideas that much greater and stronger. But the Jewish form of debate is respectful, it's honest, it's open, it's respecting the person that expresses the idea, and it's really giving a chance to not just argue your point and shout it louder, as so much we see in the world today, but to listen to what the other side is saying. So I really hope that tonight, not just from our candidates, I know we'll do that, but that all of us will listen with an open heart and an open mind to ideas on both sides and all sides, and that together we will strengthen each other in our community. So it's really my pleasure to welcome our candidates. I know they're going to have more of an introduction in a moment, as well as to welcome our moderator, Jillian Siskin. She has extensive legal experience conducting litigation at all levels of court in Ontario, as well as prosecutions, discipline hearings, and administrative tribunals, as well as she is a mother of two and has her family joining us tonight. We welcome them. And again, thank you all for joining us tonight, and welcome to Beth Torah.
Good evening, I'm Jillian Siskin. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I want to welcome each of the candidates, and I'll start from the far left. We have Arlena Hebert, who's your candidate for the Liberal Party. Natasha Doyle Merrick, your candidate from the New Democratic Party. And to my immediate left, Robin Martin from the Conservative Party. So this evening will be about asking questions and hearing answers, and there will be a strict timelines and order imposed upon this evening. I'm going to start by asking each of the candidates for opening statements, and they're going to have 2 minutes each. We then will have 4 questions that have been given already to the candidates by Brith. And then you will see on all of your seats or beside you, there are cards, cue cards. And if you want to ask questions after we finish with the 4 initial questions, you'll have an opportunity to ask your questions through the cue cards. So if you write a question down, raise your hand, somebody from Brith will come along and take your card and hand it up to me. We'll have time for about 5 questions. For each of the questions, the candidates will each have 2 minutes to answer, to provide their answers, and they will have 30 seconds to reply. So if you give me a moment where I can get my timer started. I'm going to ask my first question. Anti-Semitism in Canada is continuing to rise.
Opening statements.
Oh, opening statement. I've had a long day. Okay. So we'll do opening statements, and we're going to start.
Let's go to skip it.
I think you guys probably want it. So we're going to start with Ms. Hebert now.
Thank you, Jillian, and thank you, Brith and Beth Torah congregation for hosting tonight's debate. I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Arlena Hebert, and I'm running to be your MPP for Eglinton-Lawrence. This is an important election. It will determine the direction Ontario will take on many important issues. This election matters. We have cost of living crisis in Ontario. I'm hearing this at doors throughout our riding. We have a health care system that, despite heroic efforts through the pandemic, is on the brink. We are seeing the rise of religious intolerance across the province. Are you better off now after 4 years of Doug Ford? Regardless of who you voted for in 2018, tonight I hope to give you confidence that Stephen Del Duca and the Ontario Liberal Party are ready to make the changes you've asked for and are not getting under Doug Ford. Action on affordable housing, action on the surgical backlog, action on eliminating anti-Semitism and hate. I know the importance of advocacy that so many of you in this room do as well. As president of the Lytton Park Resident Organization for 8 years, I advocated for the community. I believe in creating livable, affordable neighborhoods with accessible infrastructure like schools and green space. I know how much you prioritize giving back, people helping people. For years, I have led volunteer teams with Out of the Cold. During the pandemic, I rallied friends and neighbors to fill in the gaps, and we distributed baked goods to homeless people around the city. I've had a career in business. I've led large teams, been responsible for large budgets, change management, crisis management. I've lived in this riding for 25 years with my husband David and our 2 kids, Sam and Alex. I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion, and I hope by the end, I will have given you the confidence you need to vote for me, Arlena Hebert. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Martin.
Thank you very much. I want to say thank you to B'nai Brith, to Beth Torah congregation, to Rabbi Sachs for hosting this all candidates meeting this evening. It really is great to be here. I'm proud to be the only candidate on the ballot in Eglinton-Lawrence with a track record of delivering results for our community. As your member of provincial parliament, I have fought for the creation of a life-saving defibrillator registry, which Heart and Stroke says will save a minimum of 1,500 lives every year. A property tax reform to keep retail on our main streets. The adoption of an anti-human trafficking protocol by all of our school boards across Ontario. And I got Ontario to be one of the few provinces to formally adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. These are real accomplishments that show what one MPP can achieve when they have a seat at the table. And our PC government is delivering real results for the community, making historic investments in new transit, new long-term care beds, new investments in hospital infrastructure, and nurses, doctors, and PSWs. We're getting it done with a plan to build our province's economy, roads and transit, a plan that makes life affordable, works for workers across Ontario, and keeps us open for good. So you're about to hear 2 very distinct visions for the future of the province. The other parties with me this evening all want to take us back to endless complaining, delays, and excuses. Back to the days when the Kathleen Wynne and Stephen Del Duca Liberals raised taxes, killed jobs, jacked up our hydro and childcare rates to the highest in the entire country. Let's not go back. Only the Ontario PCs have a plan to go forward and get it done.
Ms. Doyle-Merrick.
Hello, good evening, Shalom. I want to thank the B'nai Brith and the Beth Torah Synagogue for inviting me this evening. I think it's very important for me to talk about my journey and what led me here. I was born in the Lawrence Heights area, and growing up, the one thing I loved so much about the Eglinton and Lawrence riding was the diversity. And I think that's because I come from a diverse family. So I'm very passionate about building bridges, connections, and equality. What we unfortunately witnessed in London, Ontario on June 6, 2021, where 3 generations of a Muslim family was run down by a terrorist, one of the first groups to show up and show support was the Jewish community. It was commendable, and it shows the power in working together. We also witnessed earlier this year anti-Semitic vandalism of some of our local schools just outside the neighborhood. These types of acts show we must take a strong stance against the incline in anti-Semitic and racist ideologies. We must overcome the obstacles that are impeding our growth as a community, obstacles such as racial discrimination, anti-Semitism, growing healthcare concerns, inflation, and the housing market that is displacing people from their homes and communities. These problems are not isolated. They affect us all because we all live in this riding. I grew up in a low-income area. I am no stranger to economic barriers. However, I am here because of the supportive networks that have allowed me to create a life that I am so proud of. It shows the importance, again, of building bridges. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go on to the questions portion, I did want to just acknowledge Sam Kaplan, who's an independent riding. He's putting up his hand right now. Sam will not be able to participate in this debate, however, I'm certain he'll be around afterwards if you wish to have a conversation with him out in the hallway. So we'll now move to the first question that I gave you a sneak peek on a little bit earlier. Anti-Semitism in Canada is continuing to rise. B'nai Brith's League for Human Rights 2021 annual audit of anti-Semitic incidents showed an increase of 7.2% compared to last year. B'nai Brith reported an extremely disturbing surge of anti-Semitism stemming from the Israel-Hamas conflict in May, with more than 250 known incidents, including violent assaults in the heart of Toronto. Al-Quds Day, an annual hate fest sponsored by the Iranian regime, was also recently held in downtown Toronto, with the staging grounds at a provincially owned courthouse, 361 University. If you are elected, what will you do to ensure the protection and safety of the Jewish community in your riding and across Ontario? Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer, and I'm going to start with Ms. Martin.
Thank you. Al-Quds Day is about hating Jews. There can be no debate about this. Thankfully, we have come a long way from a decade ago when a Liberal Premier and an NDP leader saw no problem with these protests being on the grounds of Queen's Park. I have been vocal in calling for an outright prohibition on allowing provincial land to be used for this annual hate fest. And I've fought for additional resources to keep the community safe. In the last fall economic statement that our government introduced, there was a $25 million investment to support faith-based and cultural organizations being targeted with hate-motivated crimes, with enhanced security, completion of security assessments, or training for their organizations on how to respond to a hate-motivated incident. I know a number of synagogues in the riding of Eglinton-Lawrence have already taken advantage of the program. Unfortunately, both the Liberals and the NDP voted against this important investment. Against a vocal and organized opposition, I fought to get the IRA definition of anti-Semitism officially adopted by the Government of Ontario, and we got it done. But we must continue to do more to fight anti-Semitism across Ontario and across Canada. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to remind the candidates, and probably I should do the same, is to have the microphones closer to your mouth because we are being live streamed as well, just to make sure everybody, if you could use the microphones, that would be ideal. So Ms. Doyle-Merrick, you're next.
The NDP and I are deeply concerned about the rise of anti-Semitism witnessed in Ontario, especially in the last year. Being a woman of color, I'm no stranger to racial discrimination, and I also come from a family that includes the Jewish faith, so this is a major concern for me. In 1990, the NDP government established an anti-racism secretariat because they knew how important it was, and still is, to combat racism, anti-Semitism, and any form of discrimination. In 1995, when Conservatives were elected, Mike Harris got rid of it. We witnessed something similar recently as well. Doug Ford made cuts to the Anti-Racism Directorate. Ontario NDP, if elected, will expand and fully fund the Anti-Racism Directorate, as well as hire and appoint an anti-racism minister. If I am elected, I will fight for designated safe zones around houses of worship, like synagogues, and provide additional funding to assist with security costs, like hiring security guards and putting up cameras. In order to reduce hate crimes, we must prevent them from happening, which is why Ontario NDP is committed to fighting anti-Semitism in schools and post-secondary institutions. The Jewish community within the Eglinton-Lawrence riding and Ontario deserve to feel safe and protected by those in government. If elected, I will make sure that I fight for this community because the safety of my loved ones and all of you truly matters. Thank you.
Ms. Hebert.
Hate incidents have no place in our society. Jews comprise about 1.25% of Canada's population, and according to Statistics Canada, we're the target of 61% of all police-reported hate crimes and incidents aimed at religious minorities in 2020. This is unacceptable. The Ontario Human Rights Code currently allows 1 year to file a human rights complaint related to hate crimes. The Ontario Liberal Party will extend the limitation period to 5 years. The Ontario Liberal Party will undertake a legislative change to fine people who protest or intimidate others within 50 meters of religious institutions. Ontario Liberals will appoint a standalone minister responsible for anti-racism. The B'nai Brith annual 2021 audit of incidents indicates that anti-Semitism has changed in its form, growing substantially in online forums. Online hate in 2021 saw an increase of 12.3%. This needs to be combated, not tolerated. In May 2019, Canada signed the Christchurch Call and committed to introducing a digital charter. It recognized the need to address hate content online before it can lead to violence or extremism. This is an important initiative. All levels of government must work with social media companies and internet service providers to better monitor hate crimes online, to both prevent and combat the illegal hate-related activity on the internet. If elected, I will partner with both community leaders and all levels of government to combat hate crime. Thank you.
Each candidate will now have 30 seconds to respond to the other candidates, and I'll start with Ms. Martin.
Thank you very much, and it's interesting to hear the comments. I don't know why no one seems to realize that we have a Minister of Multiculturalism and Anti-Racism, but we already have one, so that's something you don't need to implement. One exists. It's Parm Gill currently. And we've been taking many initiatives across the board to fight racism. My concern in our community is with all kinds of racism, obviously, but we have seen especially virulent attacks and a number of attacks on the Jewish community.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, but we're going to have to move on.
That's fine.
Ms. Doyle-Merrick?
Yes. Well, once again, the Ford government cut support to fight anti-Semitism by not funding the Anti-Racism Directorate. They say they support the Jewish community, but they haven't taken the appropriate steps to fight anti-Semitism.
Thank you.
And that's in the data. There's been an increase in anti-Semitic behaviors and events.
Could you ladies get closer to
Oh,
the
sorry.
mic? I'm having a really hard time hearing you.
Did you hear me?
Maybe we should pick them up.
Sorry.
Ms. Doyle-Merrick, you did have 5 seconds left. Do you want to?
Oh, that's
You're
okay.
done.
Yeah,
You're
I'm
done?
good.
Okay. Ms. Hebert?
It's the sad truth that despite all our best efforts, anti-Semitism is not going to instantaneously disappear in this province. Well, we cannot fix the problem immediately. We can act now to reduce the risk of lethal violence. Ontario has been home to rising gun violence. An Ontario Liberal Party would do what Doug Ford won't. We will ban the sale, possession, transport, and storage of handguns.
5 seconds.
A Liberal government will do what is necessary to keep our community safe.
Thank you very much. Through anti-Semitic initiatives like the boycott, divestment, and sanctions, and Israel Apartheid Week, Anti-Semitism is rising on campuses around Canada, including in Ontario. There are many, particularly students in our community, who feel that certain campuses, such as U of T, do not take the issues of anti-Semitism seriously. Moreover, students themselves and even some Jewish faculty members are experiencing dangerous and threatening environments on campus. What is your party's position on combating anti-Semitism? This is a two-part question. And if you are elected, how will you ensure that the IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism, officially adopted by Ontario last year, is better implemented? Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer. I'm going to start with Ms. Doyle-Merritt.
Okay. Once again, the safety of the Jewish community matters to me. This issue isn't only political, it is personal because I have Jewish relatives. I'm open to listening and talking to members in the community to understand what I can do to ensure the Jewish residents in Eglinton-Lawrence are protected and safe. If that means we need to strengthen police oversight, then we will. I want to make this clear that the Ontario NDP in no way endorses or supports the BDS movement, which should not be used to replace good faith efforts to negotiate a peaceful and sustainable resolution to the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. And this is in regards to the second part. The IHRA working definition was created to be used as a non-legally binding guide, an educational tool to help policymakers, and we will be using it if elected throughout departments.
Thank you. Ms. Hebert.
Education is key. According to CEJA, 62% of millennials are not aware that 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust. Public schools should ensure that students are educated on the Holocaust. We must learn from our past. Let's also ensure that kids understand that our province is stronger because of our diversity. With May as Jewish Heritage Month throughout Canada, together we can recognize the incredible contributions that Jewish Canadians have made to Canada's society. We must fight anti-Semitism in colleges and universities. Education and campus policies are a key component of an anti-racism strategy. Universities should strive to do more to combat anti-Semitism, including enforcing existing anti-discrimination policies and ensuring that appropriate disciplinary measures are employed. When a student council votes to not provide kosher food, that's unacceptable. An Ontario Liberal government will provide funding to create safe, healthy, inclusive environments that make students from all backgrounds and faith feel welcomed. We live in the most multicultural province in Canada. When that diversity is celebrated on campus, it means that students can engage with new perspectives and ideas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Each candidate will now have 30 seconds to respond to
I'm
really having a hard time today.
That's okay, Jillian. We'll keep reminding you.
Thank you. Ms. Martin, go.
Thanks very much. The Ontario PC Party and I will always unequivocally stand against anti-Semitism, full stop. And no one should ever feel threatened in our university campuses. I have a proven track record of standing up against this vile hatred in the legislature and beyond, one that started long before I was ever elected or sought office. And I was proud to stand recently with Trustee Alexandra Lulka, the Toronto District School Board trustee, when she was unfairly attacked with a motion for censure for simply pointing out examples of anti-Semitic activities in the board. And I share the Jewish community's deep misgivings about the direction of post-secondary education in this province, including incidents of student unions denying Jewish clubs funding or the right to be there simply because they are Jewish. This has to end. If re-elected, I will continue to fight for the adoption of the IRA definition to be expanded across the entire broader public sector, including school boards and post-secondary institutions, and for real penalties to be imposed on public bodies that fail to combat institutional anti-Semitism.
have 30 seconds to respond to the other candidates. Ms. Doyle-Merrick.
I agree. We must fight anti-Semitism in universities and schools. And that's why Ontario NDP will make sure that children in schools are taught about the history of the Holocaust to prevent anti-Semitism and also Holocaust deniers. So I also agree with making sure that students are learning about anti-Semitism.
Thank you. Ms. Hebert.
Liberals will improve the investigation of hate crimes with enhanced Crown Attorney units dedicated to advising the police and prosecuting hate crimes. We'll also extend the limitation period for putting forward human rights complaints from 1 to 5 years. We'll make it an offense punishable by major fines for engaging in acts of criminal intimidation within 50 meters of synagogues or other faith institutions and invest in their safety and security. We'll provide new supports for students and all Ontarians to learn about the painful truth of the Holocaust.
Thank you. Ms. Martin.
Thank you, Jillian. I'm glad everybody is so in favor of education on the Holocaust in schools, because we have just funded $300 million to add more, $300,000, I should say, to add more education on the Holocaust in our schools, which we think is also very important. It's unfortunate that neither the Liberals nor the NDP in the legislature would support us when we tried to allow students to opt out of student council fees, student union fees at universities. They fought it every step of the way, but why should Jewish people have to pay when they're not getting able to have clubs and they're getting attacked for having clubs simply for being Jewish?
Thank you very much. I'd just like to remind everyone, if you have any questions for the candidates, to please fill out your cards and put up your hand. Someone from Benet, oh, okay. People didn't forget. Great. Thank you. We're going to move on to the third question now. Over the past few years, particularly during the COVID-19 crisis, the cost of housing in Canadian cities has continued to rise rapidly. The prices of gas and food are at an all-time high, and inflation is on the rise. These pressures have had a tremendous impact on most Ontarians. Basic family assets, such as a home, are now out of reach for many. What solutions does your party offer to address these serious economic barriers to building a brighter future for Ontarians and their families? Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer. I'll start with Ms. Hebert.
Ontario Liberals have a balanced, progressive, and fully costed plan to help people with rising costs. It's hard to cover all the great policies we have in 2 minutes, but here we go. As a cornerstone of this plan, we're slashing all public transit fares across the province to $1 until 2024, saving many commuters hundreds of dollars per month. We'll replace the minimum wage with a regional living wage starting at $16. Ontario Liberals will also help those who need it most with a 20% increase over 2 years to those on ODSP and a $1,000 pension top-up for seniors. We'll remove the HST from prepared foods under $20. And for childcare, an Ontario Liberal government will reduce fees for licensed childcare to $10 a day, saving parents up to $10,000 per child a year. So parents aren't punished for the Ford Conservatives' failure to act. We'll make childcare discounts retroactive to January 2022, giving families back an average of $2,750 per child. We'll also quickly move to reduce fees for before and after school care to $10 a day by September 2022. I recently met with Rabbi Septon, who emphasized the importance of this to struggling families. And for housing, we will get at least 1.5 million new homes built over the next 10 years. This is doubling the pace of home building over the last decade. We will establish the Ontario Home Building Corporation to finance and build housing of all types, and end the wait list for social and supportive housing, and build affordable homes for first-time buyers. We will bring back rent control and ensure renters have smaller, more predictable rent increases. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Martin.
Thank you very much. The other parties like to talk about making life more affordable. I saw Stephen Del Duca sign a pledge about affordability. It reminded me of when Dalton McGuinty signed a pledge not to raise our taxes. So I'm expecting something similar. When they were in government, they took every chance to make life more expensive. Under Kathleen Wynne and Stephen Del Duca, everything went up. If you can name a fee or a tax, it increased under their watch. They increased transit fees, gas taxes, taxes on beer and wine, taxes on small business, taxes on aviation fuel so that your plane flights cost more, and taxes on middle-class families. They hiked the cost of riding transit, getting a driver's license, a fishing or a hunting license, camping license, a liquor license, an event permit, even a court application. The Liberals raised gas taxes by 4.3 cents a litre. We're cutting taxes on gas by 10 cents a litre. The Liberals nearly doubled the cost of license plate stickers. We've eliminated them, saving drivers $120 per year per vehicle. We created and are increasing the LIFT tax credit, so now anyone making less than $50,000 a year will no longer pay any provincial income tax. We've introduced the Ontario childcare tax credit, covering up to 75% of childcare expenses in all kinds of arrangements. Those are just a few examples. But you also mentioned housing. So at the end of the day, the biggest issue with housing and our housing crisis is not enough homes. That's why our Ontario PC government introduced legislative, regulatory, and policy changes throughout our time in office to build new homes in Ontario, and the approach is working. Our housing supply plan helped start over 100,000 new homes last year, the highest for 30 years, and we have the highest number of rental housing starts as well. That's why I'm so happy that the Liberals and the NDP have joined us in our commitment to build 1.5 million homes in 10 years.
Thank you. Ms. Doyle-Merrick.
Thank you. Like all communities, I'm sure you want the younger generation to be able to financially afford housing. Previous parties in power have failed to address the housing crisis effectively. There is undeniably a housing crisis. This is a topic I frequently discuss with my friends and other younger people. We're a bit concerned about our future, if we will be able to afford a house, and if we'll have to move 3-4 hours outside the city to do so. And I want to stay close to my family, and so do other younger people. And it seems a bit impossible to do so right now. That's why the Ontario NDP is committed to increase the availability of housing options that are affordable. We will also require developers to include affordable homes in their projects, so people of all incomes can continue living in their growing communities. In addition to measures targeting speculators driving up the cost of housing, our plan would create a shared equity loan of up to 10% of a home value for first-time home buyers. The program will be available for those whose household income is less than $200,000 annually. The NDP will also preserve affordability for renters by bringing back real rent control for all apartments. For years, Liberals and Conservative governments have allowed auto insurance rates to climb and have ignored basic issues of fairness. We will lower the increasing cost of transportation by ending unfair gas pricing and insurance rates. Lastly, we will bring forth affordable electricity and expand hydroelectricity, decreasing the price of hydro for families and businesses.
10 seconds. Yet
still meeting our climate goals and creating thousands of good-paying jobs in Ontario. Thank you.
Thank you. Each candidate will now have 30 seconds to respond to the other candidates. Ms. Hebert.
While the Ford Conservatives pretend that everything has gone back to normal, Ontario Liberals recognize that families need relief from increased costs of everyday staples, from an overheating housing market, and from the burnout that has come with after 2 years of living under a pandemic. This election is about a choice between the Ontario Liberal plan that will help families save money and provide relief, and the Ford Conservative plan that does really nothing for the affordability crisis we're facing.
Ms. Martin.
Thank you very much. The $1 transit fare has a slight problem. And Mr. Del Duca himself said that it would cause people to fall off into the subways because they're already too crowded. If you have $1 transit fare, they're going to be even more crowded. However, I really want to talk about electricity bills. We have done so much to lower electricity bills. The Financial Accountability Officer confirmed that they're 12% lower than they would have been under the Liberals. Under the Liberals, they would have increased 6% every year until 2028. Ours will be decreased by 23% in 2029. The Liberals signed 33,000 contracts with well above the going rate of power.
Thank you very much.
And tied us in for 15 years.
Ms. Doyle Merrick.
Doug Ford didn't make housing affordable. He canceled rent control for countless renters, and he cut homeless problems. This is why we are in a crisis. Ontario NDP is committed to building affordable housing because housing is a human right. We will bring back real rent control so people can live financially comfortable. Thank you.
Thank you. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed severe gaps in Ontario's healthcare system, ranging from a lack of hospital beds to poor working conditions for nurses and doctors, as well as deficiencies in long-term care facilities. Even as our province emerges from the pandemic, many of these underlying and systemic issues persist. What will your party do to ensure that Ontarians from all walks of life have access to a timely and properly functioning healthcare system? Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer, and we'll start with Ms. Martin.
Thank you very much. The Wynne Del Duca Liberals left our healthcare system in a shambles. They left our pandemic stockpile expired and empty. They fired over 1,600 nurses, made cuts to residency programs, cut the physician services budget by $815 million, and only built 611 long-term care beds, leaving hospital hallways overflowing with patients. In just 4 years, our PC government has invested historic amounts in our healthcare system. We invested $3.8 billion over a 10-year program for mental health and addictions. And we have the first Ontario Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, a new strategic plan called the Roadmap to Wellness, and we're increasing spending every year at $725 million extra on mental health and addictions. We're the only party with a plan to stay open, including $40 billion over the next year in hospital infrastructure, adding 3,000 new beds permanently, and we've already added 3,100 new beds during COVID-19. Our plan also includes a major funding increase of $1 billion over the next 3 years, $1.5 billion over the next 3 years for home and community care. Before COVID, we eliminated the service maximums for home care to ensure that people get the amount of care they need to stay in their home if that's where they want to be. And the Del Duca Wynne Liberals didn't do that for 15 years. We're also building or upgrading 58,000 long-term care beds. They're already in process to modern standards, including 4 hours of direct care per resident per day, which the Liberals didn't do either, doubling the number of inspectors, so we have one for every 2 homes, and we're hiring more than 40,000 nurses, PSWs, and frankly, hundreds of doctors, the first new doctor positions in 10 years to staff up our healthcare system, our long-term care system, and our home care system so people get the care that they deserve.
Thank you very much. Ms. Doyle Merrick.
So many of us have experienced a rough 2 years because of COVID-19 and the pandemic. We are witnessing an increase in mental health and have seen poor treatment and neglect of seniors within this province. We are one of the wealthiest provinces, yet we are dead last on per capita funding for healthcare, hospitals, and post-secondary education. It's an embarrassment. Doug Ford made cuts to critical services before the pandemic by refusing to invest in hospitals and healthcare. And that's why it was a disaster, a lack of beds, doctors, and nurses. Ontario NDP will invest $13.6 billion into our healthcare, home care, and long-term care systems. $2.4 billion will be invested in universal mental health care programs under OHIP, and $1 billion towards pharmacare. We will also be hiring 30,000 nurses and 10,000 PSWs. I spoke yesterday with an Alzheimer's organization who informed me that close to 2,000 residents within this riding suffer from dementia. I think it's very crucial today for us to realize that many individuals within this riding are suffering because the current government didn't and won't take action to ensure that those who are vulnerable are able to receive the care they need. 4,000 seniors died alone during COVID-19. This did not have to happen, but it did because of who was voted in 4 years ago. Ontario NDP is committed to establish provincial standards for home and community services by developing meal preparation and nursing care to help with medication management. We'll hold service providers accountable to ensure they meet the provincially regulated criteria for basic services. Overall, I'm committed to hearing what can be done within this riding to ensure those who are suffering from illness, age, or mental health are provided with the support they need. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hebert.
I'm glad you asked this question. We've been let down by the healthcare choices the Ford government has made over the last 4 years. People died of dehydration in long-term care. Mental health wait lists have doubled. Hallway healthcare is increasing. Liberals will repeal Bill 124, which restricts the annual pay increases to 1%. We'll train and hire 100,000 nurses, doctors, and other healthcare workers over the next 6 years as we replace the retiring workers and expand our system. We'll clear the surgical and diagnostic backlog with a $1 billion investment in additional capacity without looking to the private sector. We'll reverse the Ford Conservatives' deep cuts to mental health and connect more people to mental health supports by investing an additional $3 billion over 4 years in mental health and addiction. We will provide all Ontario workers with a portable benefit package, including drugs, dental, and mental health services. This matters. We estimate that about 33% of Ontarians do not have private health insurance or workplace benefits. Under Ford's watch, the wait list for autism services has doubled to 50,000 kids. Promise after promise was broken. Families and kids deserve better. Ontario Liberals will bring in a needs-based program that does not discriminate based on age. Also, Ontario is ready for a revolution in senior care. 95% of people want to age at home. We will change the focus to support seniors to stay at home or in small community home settings. It costs about a third to support seniors to stay at home or versus an institution. We will transition from for-profit long-term care to non-profit or municipally run facilities. It is clear that profit and care don't mix. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Each candidate will now have 30 seconds to respond to the other candidates, and we'll start with Ms. Martin.
Thank you very much. Honestly, there's so much to talk about there, but let's talk about autism. I have a child on the spectrum. That's a near and dear to my heart issue. The Ontario Conservative Party is now servicing more than five times as many people as were serviced under the Liberal autism program. 8,000 children alone. That's it. We're getting services. When they were in office, 40,000 were waiting. Now we may have a longer list, but it's because more people have been diagnosed with autism, but everybody will get services under our new Ontario autism program designed by the community for the community.
Thank you very much. Ms. Doyle-Merrick.
In 2019, the Ford government introduced and passed Bill 124, and that froze the wages of healthcare workers. Our healthcare workers deserve better treatment, and that's why Ontario NDP will end Conservative and Liberal cuts that have broken our healthcare system. Thank you.
Ms. Hebert.
We can't deliver health care without frontline workers. Ontario Liberals will do what the Ford Conservatives failed to do. We'll value these frontline workers by paying them a fair wage. An Ontario Liberal government will repeal the unfair wage capping Bill 124 that limits their pay to increases of 1% when inflation is running above 5%. A Liberal government will provide healthcare heroes with the pay they deserve, including a minimum wage increase to $25 for personal support workers.
Thank you. This is a question for all candidates that came from the audience. We've had a couple questions on climate change and the environment. If elected, how will you and your party implement policies that combat climate change and ensure an environmentally sustainable future and a zero-emission future? Ms. Doyle-Merrick.
Thank you for asking the question. I'm going to make this a bit personal. I just recently came back from Dublin, Ireland, and I'm a climate ambassador over my university for Dublin City University. So I'm very passionate about climate change solutions. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know a lot about this issue with my party. I just recently started, and I'm open to getting the information, the contact information from the person who submitted that, and responding to them personally about what our party will be doing.
Thank you. There were a couple people interested, so I'm sure that you can all
for
speak
sure.
outside. Ms. Hebert.
An elected Ontario Liberal government will re-establish Ontario's leadership on the environment, cutting greenhouse gas emissions by 50% below 2005 levels by 2030. We will slash all public transit fares across the province to $1 until January 2024. This will take 400,000 car trips off the road, reduce pollution and congestion. We will scrap Highway 413. We will not pave over important wetlands and farmlands to only shave an average of 30 seconds off commutes. We will designate 30% of land as protected areas by 2030, up from 10%, and take the equivalent of 500,000 cars off the road by planting 800 million new trees over the next 8 years. Ontario Liberals will strengthen the requirements of the Conservatives' existing industrial carbon pricing system to ensure the biggest polluters do their part to meet our 50% reduction target. In addition, we will expand the Greenbelt and create 5 new provincial parks. For Ontarians concerned about the impacts of climate change, the choice is clear: soaring emissions or a Liberal costed plan that makes polluters pay and makes sustainable choices more affordable for families.
Ms. Martin.
Thank you very much. Doug Ford and our Ontario PC team are getting it done with historic investments to protect the environment and secure the next generation of jobs at the same time. The environment and the economy can go together. We're taking action on climate change by positioning Ontario as a world leader in the production of electric vehicles and electric batteries, and this is going to be a game changer for all of our climate change initiatives. Securing Ontario's first electric vehicle battery plant, creating 2,500 jobs. We've made a $5 billion investment, securing the retooling of the GM Oshawa and Ingersoll plants, $2 billion to make a full-scale electric production of commercial vehicles, retooling Ford's Oakville plant to make it a hub for battery vehicles, and retooling Honda's Alliston plant also. And we secured a $3.6 billion investment from Stellantis to do the same in Windsor and Brampton. All of these things are going to be a virtuous circle. Ontario is one of the only places in the world with all of the ingredients, the minerals we need to make electric vehicle batteries. And this is going to be a game changer for Ontario. We also invested $500 million to help Dofasco make its blast furnaces electric. This is the equivalent of taking 1 million cars off the road, 3 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions. That in itself is a huge initiative. But all of these things are along with new emission standards for large emitters, fines to hold them more accountable, the restoration and addition of over 1,200 hectares of wetlands, Ontario's first ever climate change assessment. All of these things working together. We also expanded the Greenbelt into urban river valleys and the Paris-Galt Moraine. Unfortunately, when the Liberals were in power, they cut 350 hectares out of the Greenbelt.
seconds to respond to the other candidates. Ms. Doyle-Merrick, you're first.
Our climate jobs, we hope to launch one of the world's largest green building retrofit programs, creating at least 100,000 jobs alone. Once again, I'm open to connecting with individuals who submitted the questions, and I'm very passionate about fighting climate change, and I hope I could get residents within the riding to be just as engaged as I am. Thank you.
Ms. Hebert.
The Conservative climate plan has amounted to little more than faulty gas pump stickers, a $30 million failed carbon pricing lawsuit, and ripped up clean energy contracts. Conservatives canceled funding for home charging stations. They ripped out charging stations that had already been installed and removed charging station rough-ins from the Ontario Building Code, all of which the Liberals will reverse.
Ms. Martin.
Thank you very much. On all of these things, everybody is trying to make good decisions. The charging stations that were ripped out were charging stations which were at GO train stations. So one person would pull in, park their car, and charge it for the day, but it wasn't very useful for anybody else. So they weren't getting much use, and that was the reason those stations were taken out, not that we're against charging stations. Charging stations will have to be part of the solution. Those weren't good ones.
This is a question to all of the candidates. What is one issue that you are most passionate about, and what specific skill, experience, and talent do you have to make a difference in making it better? We'll start with Ms. Hebert.
So, education is really important to me. My mother taught children with autism and special needs, and I saw firsthand the kind of resources and support that's needed, that all children need in order for them to succeed. I'm a mom of 2 children who went to school in the riding. They went to John Ross Robertson, Glenview Senior Public School, and Lawrence Park Collegiate. I've been very active in the community with the schools. In Ontario, we can be proud that our education system is amongst the best in the world, but that doesn't happen by accident. You have to invest. You have to implement innovative, meaningful policies. You have to be responsive to the students of today. These are all the things that the Ford government has proven they're unwilling to do. Cutting $1.3 billion in school funding, cutting OSAP in half, cutting in-class instructional time, cutting autism funding. Notice a trend? Our Liberal plan stands in stark contrast to what I've seen over the last 4 years. We will invest an additional $10 billion to build and repair more schools by canceling Ford's misguided Highway 413 that would have paved over our greenbelt. We will hire 5,000 more special education workers and 1,000 mental health professionals. We will repeal Bill 124. An Ontario Liberal government will freely negotiate new collective agreements in good faith with all the public sector employees. We will double OSAP funding. We will reinstate grade 13 as an optional 5th year of high school, knowing that the pandemic stole so many of our kids of the their learning opportunities. We will eliminate mandatory online learning. We will lower and cap size of classes at 20 at all grades, province-wide. Unlike the Ford government, we don't believe that increasing class sizes builds resiliency.
Thank you. Ms. Martin.
Oh, thanks very much. There are so many issues, frankly, that I'm quite passionate about. It's hard to pick one. I already mentioned autism, and I just should say that we actually doubled the funding for autism, so I don't know how that could be a cut. It went from less than $300 million to $600 million. Please check the public accounts for accurate information. That is something I'm totally passionate about. What I would like to work on, specifically on that, is what happens to people when they age out of the system. Right now they get passport funding, but they're pretty much left on their own with their families to manage. And I think we can get a lot of them into the workforce, and we should, because they'll have a more fulfilling life and it will be easier for everybody. That's something I personally would like to work on. But I'm also very passionate about healthcare. I've been the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Health for the last 4 years. I can tell you we have not cut any healthcare funding, and that we put Bill 124 in so we didn't have to fire 1,600 nurses or any number of nurses the way the former Liberal government did, or have Ray days the way the former NDPs did. Bill 124 was there to have 1% increases for salary grids, but individuals could get raises, and nurses during the pandemic, who helped us all so much, received on average $12,000 extra during the pandemic, plus a $5,000 incentive, retention incentive. So nurses did get compensated for the extra work they were having to do. I am very passionate about making our healthcare system work, and work well, because it has to. We all rely on it. We all need it. And I think that means making sure that we push care back into home and community, and have people stay healthy at home as long as possible, have more preventative health care. And that is what Minister Elliott started with her design of the Ontario Health Teams, which will push more of the home care into the home and out of hospitals, because hospitals are not the best place to be, not for mental health, not for any of the other needs you have. You don't want to be in the hospital.
Thank you. Ms. Doyle-Merrick.
One thing I'm passionate about is fighting against discrimination due to my lived experiences as a biracial Black woman. I strongly believe our education systems need to teach students about racism and discrimination. I remember growing up and I only got to learn about my people's accomplishments for 1 month. And it took a very long time for me to realize how beautiful and how great it is to be of color. Because attending a school system that didn't share the amazing accomplishments that Black people have achieved made me feel that perhaps I was inferior to other racial groups. So I'm very passionate about changing the school system. My mother, she's a teacher assistant, and she works with special needs kids at Flemington Public School. And right now, hearing her stories, it's very important that we lower class sizes, because it's very difficult right now for teachers to be able to commit the time and to give the children the right amount of energy and care that they need. So I am passionate, and my lived experiences, I am passionate about fixing the educational system based on my lived experiences.
Each candidate will now have 30 seconds to respond to the other candidates. Ms. Hebert.
So I'm passionate about doing things in the community. I think we can all do better, and when we work together, we can find solutions to problems, big or small. So, I mean, I come at this from a volunteer and a long-time advocate, and I believe in making a difference, each of us, together.
Thank you. Ms. Martin.
Thank you very much. I'm also a longtime volunteer and advocate in the community. I actually was on the Lytton Park Ratepayers organization for many years. Arlena was on, I think, just as I was leaving, because I had to help my children at that point. But I'm very passionate, as I said, about many issues. One of the things I'm very passionate about is energy, which I spent a lot of time learning about what was going on. I'm appalled that they put $40 billion on our electricity bills in order to hide what they had done on the energy file, and makes me think we can't vote Liberal again.
Ms. Doyle-Merrick.
In regards to education, I think it's just very important that we lower class sizes, hire thousands of teachers and education workers, give kids the special education and emotional supports they need now more than ever. Also, I just really believe within this community, it's so important right now, because of what's going on around the world, that we do build bridges between the different religious groups and ethnic groups. My
5 seconds.
My father's side is Muslim. my brother's family is Jewish, so I really know the importance, and my mother is Catholic, so I just know the importance of working together, and that's something I really want to do.
Thank you very much. This is a question to all of the candidates. What are your plans for addressing the health and safety issues that have intensified in the schools since the onset of the COVID crisis? And we'll start with Ms. Martin.
Well, thank you very much. Schools are very important. We've all said education is one of the most important things, I think, to most people. And certainly, we want our children to have a good future. And I think we've done, first of all, we haven't cut education, despite what some people have been saying. We haven't cut it at all. Again, please check the public accounts for the facts. This year, we're having historic amounts invested in education, $26.6 billion, which is the highest ever. These are not cuts. This is an increase. With respect to crime, we put $187 million into the Guns and Gangs task force to try to deal with this. We've asked the federal government to please do something about the bail program because they keep letting people out when they're arrested, and it is a serious issue. I went to a town hall at Lawrence Heights where we talked about the gun and gang violence that was happening. I know it's also in the schools sometimes, which is terrifying because that's where our children are, and we want to make sure that they are safe, but we also want to make sure that they're safe walking to the schools in the community. And right now, it's very dangerous. The most important thing is to deal with the smuggling of guns that come over the border. A handgun ban will do absolutely nothing, and I kind of was very surprised that the Liberals would start their campaign off with an announcement about a policy which everybody knows will not solve the problem. The problem will only be solved, according to all the experts, the police, by doing something about the guns coming over the border. Not the guns that are here, the guns coming over the border that are smuggled here. Those are the ones that are in the hands of people who are committing crimes. That's something we have to do about it, and we have to stop the federal government's letting people out too early when they should serve a sentence for the crime. These are really important initiatives to keep our communities safe.
Thank you very much. Ms. Doyle-Merrick.
I come from the Lawrence Heights community, so once again, I'll be talking about my personal experience. I'm very proud of where I come from, and I'm proud of it for many reasons. And yes, there was criminal activity that did take place, and I feel the reason that occurred was because we are often ignored by the government. And despite what you just said, and the area is beautiful, and I know that there is a reputation that there is a lot of crime and it's dangerous and it's not safe, but there's a lot of beauty in that neighborhood. It's a community. I remember growing up and my neighbors beside me, they were Vietnamese, and my other neighbors were Eritrean. So yes, there is crime, and yes, it is important that we do address it and that the government does address it that's in power. But I also want everyone in this room to know that there is a lot of issues that need to be fixed in the neighborhood, but it isn't all bad. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
Ms. Hebert.
So ensuring the health and safety of the people of our community is the most important duty that we can undertake as a government. And I'll say this, during the pandemic, schools should have been the last to close and the first to open, but they were not. The 2 years of the pandemic dealt a devastating blow to not only the educational development of our children, but also their mental health. Doug Ford's Conservatives prioritized big business and shortchanged our kids at every turn. We won't make the same mistakes. We're going to fix the ventilation standards in all schools. We're going to secure a robust provincial stockpile of free in-home rapid tests and high-quality masks. We will provide 10 paid sick days to all workers, and we will do all that we can do to keep our kids in school safely.
Thank you. Each candidate will will now have 30 seconds to respond to the other candidates. Ms. Martin.
Thanks very much, and I just want to say I went to all the Lawrence Heights meetings I could go to. It is a wonderful community. There's some wonderful people there doing wonderful things. It just needs some more help, and we got to make sure it's safe. As far as the schools being first to open and last to close, the Liberals wanted us to keep the schools closed more than we kept them closed. I think other people wanted those schools to be open, and we tried to strike the best balance we could. Very difficult decisions with imperfect information available to us and a virus that was evolving all the time. Ventilation has already been fixed. We've already invested in that. We make 46% of our masks here in our personal protective equipment here in Ontario now, and 93% in 18 months.
I'll make this really short. We must protect teachers and we must protect our students. We need to make sure their needs are being met. And that's what I firmly believe in.
Ms. Hebert.
Okay, it was mentioned, we mentioned the handgun ban that the Liberals would like to do. And I just want to clarify that we will ban the sale, possession, and transport and storage of handguns. Our plan will include that we will accept the federal government's offer to fund a buyback program. We will partner with the federal government to stop gun smuggling at Ontario-US borders, and we will push to extend the ban nationally so that guns can't be funneled between provinces. We will do what's necessary to keep our community safe.
Thank you. This is a question for all the candidates. Transit is a serious issue across the GTA and especially in Toronto. What is your party doing to increase the transit and capacity of transit here in Toronto and the GTA generally? I'll start with Ms. Doyle-Merrick.
We will be restoring funding to public transit cut that was done by Conservatives and Liberals by providing 50% of transit operating costs for municipalities. We'll stop using P3S, which cause delays, costs more and privatizes our public transit. Invest in two-way, all-day GO rail service between Kitchener, Waterloo, and Toronto, as well as year-round GO rail service between Niagara and Toronto. Free transfers as well, from GO to municipal transit service.
Ms. Hebert.
Ontario Liberals will slash all public transit fares across the province to $1 until January 2024. That will take 400,000 car trips off the road, reduce pollution and congestion. It will change patterns of behavior. And as needed, we're going to fund the extra capacity that's going to be required. We'll make it more affordable and safer to bike and walk and drive by providing up to a $500 rebate for e-bikes. We'll be expanding cycling lanes and trails and making it easier to find and park bikes. And at the same time, we know that more work is required to build our roads and transit infrastructure so that more families can get where they're going quickly. And we're reversing Doug Ford's cuts to electric vehicle rebates by providing up to $9,500 in support so that we can meet the target of only selling zero-emission vehicles by 2025. When Doug Ford thinks about transit, he thinks about paving over important wetlands and farmland with his Highway 413 project that would only shave an average of 30 seconds off commutes. We will scrap Highway 413 while maintaining all existing funded transit plans. Thank you.
Ms. Martin.
Thank you very much for the question. Such an important question. We really need to get building transit across the GTA. We need it so badly. We needed it yesterday, and we need to get on with it. So our government has a $28.5 billion transit plan, which is including 4 lines, the biggest of which is the Ontario line, which should help take some pressure off Yonge and Eglinton, which is under a lot of pressure, which will go from the Exhibition Stadium, also taking pressure off Union Station, up to the Science Centre. And we've already got, by the way, the boring machine in the ground, which is a historically fast way to we've got there that quickly, from conception of the plan, agreement of all the parties. The city's on board, everybody's on board with it, federal government's on board, we're making announcements. The boring machine is in the ground on that line because we learned from the mistakes on the Eglinton LRT, which is taking too long. We've also got the Scarborough line and the extension up to Richmond Hill and Eglinton LRT extension out west, and hopefully will be attached to Pearson. We're going to make a transit system that works, but in addition to that, we're spending $30 billion on two-way all-day GO trains to Kitchener, Waterloo, etc. Every time the Liberals announce something, it's something we've already done. So I'm not quite sure what the announcements came from. They probably just said, pick the ones they liked from what we already had. But that's what we're doing. We are spending $3 on transit and trains for every $1 that we're spending on highways, roads, and bridges across the enormous province of Ontario. So what I'm telling you is we have a balanced plan which prioritizes transit and trains, but we also have to build roads, bridges, and highways across Ontario, and that's what we're doing. There were highways built in the past by the Liberals that did chop into the green belt. I think the 407 extension, 412, 418, those highways chopped into the green belt.
Thank you very much. Each candidate will now have 30 seconds to respond to the other candidates. We'll start with Ms. Doyle-Merrick.
Ford's big cuts, long delays, and bad choices have been a disaster for transit users across Ontario. He cut over $1.5 billion from public transit. Ford's private partnerships, P3S, to build his Ontario line will lead to delays, cost overruns, and privatization, just like it did with Ottawa's LRT and Eglinton Crosstown in Toronto.
Ms. Hebert.
So I just want to clarify that we will, of course, plan to scrap the Highway 413 while maintaining all existing funded transit plans. And just to clarify, for too long, changing governments in Ontario have ripped up or ignored existing plans, delaying progress and contributing to more gridlock and pollution. An Ontario Liberal government will stop that trend. We will maintain all existing funded transit plans.
Thank you. Ms. Martin.
Thanks very much. The reason we don't have the electric vehicle rebates that existed under the Liberals was because the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, amongst others, looked at this and said, this is the most expensive thing you could possibly do for the least and the least effective thing you can possibly do. And it basically gives money to rich people to buy expensive Teslas and things like that. It's not for the average man. That is not a very effective use of our dollars. 413 will cut 30 minutes each way for people. And we're not using it in this riding, so it's not really for us.
This will be the final question from the audience. Queen's Park has recognized the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. But how will you make sure that you legislate this definition so that it's legally binding? A legally binding definition of anti-Semitism. We'll start with Ms. Hebert.
So I would just like to say, and I'm going to be simple on it, I would like to say that I'm absolutely committed to a free and safe, secure state of Israel, and that Israel has its right to defend itself. First and foremost, I think that the Liberal Party and Stephen Del Duca have a long history of supporting the Jewish community. In 2016, the Ontario legislature actually passed an anti-BDS motion fully supported by the Liberal caucus. Stephen Del Duca, most people know, has a long history of supporting Jewish charities. Thank you.
Ms. Martin.
Well, thank you very much for the question. The IHRA definition is meant to be a working definition and isn't meant to be legally binding. And I think that might take something away from what it is. It lists a whole bunch of examples of anti-Semitism, and it's meant to be able to help people identify this particular thing is anti-Semitism. For example, when people criticize Israel for the same things that they don't criticize other countries for, that is anti-Semitism because it's aimed at a particular community. So that's what the IRA definition does. It's not meant to be binding, but I think, you know, there are ways that we can make laws that are binding to protect the community, and we need to make sure that we educate people, as we've all said, as much as possible about the Holocaust. I brought a motion to have a Holocaust memorial put on the grounds of Queen's Park, and that also passed. And I think that's another way to invite people to contemplate the horrors of the past so we make sure that they never happen again.
Thank you very much. Ms. Doyle-Merrick.
We are also committed to building a memorial at Queen's Park as well. I'm just going to state what I said before. The IRA working definition was created to be used as a non-legally binding guide, an educational tool to help policymakers, and we will be using it if NDP is elected throughout our departments.
Each candidate will now have 30 seconds to respond to the other candidates. Ms. Hebert.
So I just want to say, first and foremost, that I'm always concerned about the safety and security of people in our riding. I believe the safety and security of people in our riding is best addressed by all levels of government working together. While I understand that Robin Martin has not had the opportunity to contact Marco Mendicino, the MP for our riding, and currently Minister of Public Safety, about public safety issues in Eglinton-Lawrence, I frequently talk to Marco about local matters that are important to our community, and I continue to do so as your MPP.
Thank you very much. Ms. Martin.
Well, thank you very much. I'm not sure how Ms. Hebert knows about my conversations with Marco Mendicino, but as your MPP for the last 4 years, I've had many conversations with Marco Mendicino. In fact, we attended together the town hall in Lawrence Heights, which was about gun and gang violence, with Mark Saunders, who was the chief of police at the time, who is now the Conservative candidate in Don Valley West. So yes, I've talked to Marco many times about public safety.
Once again, our party believes in fighting against any sort of racism, anti-Semitism, or discrimination in Ontario. We are committed to making sure that the school system, if we are elected, teaches students and children about the history of the Holocaust to prevent anti-Semitism. Also, growing up in the community, I believe that
5 seconds.
that treating everybody fairly and equality and fighting against discrimination is very important, and that is something that I'm very passionate about. And if elected, that is something I will focus my attention on.
Thank you. I'm now going to invite each of the candidates to give closing statements. They'll have 3 minutes each. And I will start with Ms. Martin.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank again everyone for joining us this evening. I know it's hard to sit there and not say anything when people are talking up here, because I'm sure some of you would like to get in on the debate. I also want to say a special thank you to Gillian Siskind for taking on the hardest job of all, to try to control all of us, and obviously for our hosts, Beth Torah Congregation, Rabbi Sachs, and B'nai Brith. I just want to say, after knocking on 30,000, 40,000 doors for the last few months with my team, it's clear that people are really sick of all of the talk, the complaining, the delays, the excuses from all the parties. And they want a government and a premier with a real plan. A plan to build new homes that you can afford. A plan to get you out of gridlock by building new roads, by expanding GO Train and transit, and by building highways. A plan to give you a break and put more money in your pocket. A plan to create new and better jobs. A plan that says yes to enhanced home care. Yes to building more long-term care beds. Yes to building new hospitals across the province. And yes to recruiting more than 40,000 personal support workers, nurses, and doctors. It's a plan that will see an Ontario PC government re-elected across the province on June 2nd. So if you're still undecided, here's a question to think about. Do you want to re-elect a strong voice for your community someone with a track record of delivering results, someone who will have a seat at the table in the next PC government, or do you want to vote for someone who will spend the next 4 years complaining from the opposition benches without any influence on how the decisions are made? We can't afford to go back to the days when the Liberals took this riding and this community for granted. Back to the days when they sent our hydro bills skyrocketing by $1,000 per month for the average family and trying to hide it, by failing to admit their hydro mistake. They also sold control of Hydro One while Liberal insiders got rich. Only the Ontario PCs have a plan to get it done for the people of Ontario by rebuilding our economy, working for workers, building highways, transit and infrastructure, keeping costs down, and a plan to keep us open for good. I'm asking for your support on June 2nd. Let's get it done.
Ms. Doyle-Merrick.
I just want to thank everyone for coming out this evening, B'nai Brith and the Beth Torah Synagogue for inviting me. We talked a lot tonight about what people up here on the stage have done or will do to make our community better for all of us. I think everyone on the stage loves Eglinton-Lawrence and truly wants to do their best for us all. This is my home, and I would love to build bridges to connect communities so we can help each other grow in healthy ways. I'm eager to learn, and I promise I'll make sure that the needs of this community are met. I'll put my heart and my soul into it because what is affecting you all is affecting me too. This election is definitely about picking someone who will stand up for our community in Queen's Park and fix what's broken. This election is about choosing the person who will stand by you and help make life more affordable and provide the critical public services you could depend on. I know Andrea is the right person because of her dedication to improving a system that desperately needs to be fixed. Please, when you vote on June 2nd, think about who is going to go into office and form a government that will improve the lives of all people. It is important for us to truly come together during these difficult times to create a society that cares about vulnerable residents and those who are marginalized and oppressed. This hope starts with electing Andrea Horwath and the NDP, a government that puts people at the heart of every decision. Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hebert.
Thanks again, Jillian, and thanks to all of you for being here tonight. We can't underestimate the importance of civic engagement, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen, learn, weigh in on who should be the next MPP for Eglinton-Lawrence. I'd like to thank Robin and Natasha, and of course, we don't always agree on everything, but it takes a lot of courage to put your name forward, and I respect your desire to bring about change to our community and our province. And at a time when we're working to get more women in politics, quite frankly, I think it's pretty neat to have 3 of us up here.
I agree.
When you head to the ballot box on June 2nd, think about the issues that matter most to you, including some of those discussed today: the cost of living, healthcare, religious intolerance, public safety. Provincial policies matter. A Liberal government will deliver the changes you need and the changes that the people of Ontario deserve. But above all, the campaign promises, I hope I've shown you the type of person I am. I'm someone who listens, who works hard, and I'm not afraid to roll up my sleeves to get the job done. I got into this race because, like you, I believe in people helping people. There's a lot we can do together. And if I have the honor of serving you as your MPP, believe me, you're going to see positive change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That closes tonight's event. I do want to thank the 3 candidates. I was incredibly impressed by all 3 of you, and so I think everybody in this riding has a very difficult choice to make. Of course, I also appreciate and thank Beth Torah, the synagogue, and B'nai Brith for putting on this really important night of civic engagement. So enjoy the rest of your evening. I'm sure the candidates will be happy to speak with you outside. Thank you very much.